And I think we organize around the story, around the client's story. And it actually simplifies things for us.
This is Velocitize Talks. I'm Eric Jones. I'm here with Jamey Boike, the founder of Revere. Jamey, good to have you.
Welcome to Seattle.
Thanks. Tell us a little bit about Revere and the insight that you had that led to its creation.
I can't say there was one insight, but I would actually start with where I met you years before then. We started the New York office for a boutique tech PR firm way back when. And I remember it was hard. We built a business from the ground up. We were practicing something different than that parent company, than that home office out in Silicon Valley. And it was up to us to write the brochure, to lug the office printer from J&R Music World back to the office. We had to find our office space. We had to drum up our clients and figure out what our expertise was and what our differentiation was in the market. And all of that work was not working with clients and not necessarily even making money at the time. It was building the foundation to make the money and run the business. And I found that really rewarding, really fun, really challenging. I love that steep learning curve of the pure building. And so that was, I think, an early experience, if not an insight, that really kind of stuck with me and led me to want to found an agency, again, from the ground up, built to do something unique in the market.
And what would you say Revere's competitive differentiator is in the market?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I was sitting across from a founder like this about 6 months before I founded Revere, about 5 years ago. And at the time, I had worked on a quick project with him. I was working at a global PR firm. And I worked with him on this project. We did great with it. It was launching probably his Series B fundraising. And the project came to conclusion. I said, this has been great. We were very happy with the results. We made a real impact on his business. And yet we couldn't work with him because he was a conflict with that global agency's client. And we couldn't run a program ongoing with that conflict in there. It was just part of the parameters for our work. And he looked across the table when we were kind of saying adios, and he said, can you please, he said, I've talked to the firms up and down the West Coast and certainly in town in Seattle. And he said, could you please introduce me to somebody who cares about my business like you do? And it was certainly a nice comment to hear, but it was, I guess, back to your question about insight, it was something that stuck with me, and I really took that as evidence of an opportunity in the market.
Why is it so critical today that agencies move fast for their clients?
Technology, you think about, and this is now kind of much longer time frame, but think about the duration of radio over history, and then the duration of TV as a dominant platform. And then you look at the internet, and then you look at social media, and I could go on, but those platforms, the period of time that they're dominant is just shorter and shorter. And so as an agency, we've got to be up on traditional media, but we've got to be up on, Snap and TikTok and, everything that is just coming down the pike and will only be around for months, potentially. But we've got to be really smart on that. And I think in both of those areas, in media, in tech, speed has real intrinsic value.
Today you're playing across, owned and paid and social as well as earned. Tell me how you're thinking across all those different media areas and actually reinforcing them for the benefit of your clients.
I always think in structure and hierarchy, and that's how I assemble my views. And I think we organize around the story, around the client's story. And it actually simplifies things for us. If we can derive the story and really cast that story, then all of a sudden we become a lot more agnostic about how we get the story out there, where we get the story out there, which channel are we using? Will we seek out earned media as the big center of gravity for a client's campaign? Or will we actually start, we're going to be doing this next week, launching a company, we're going to start on social and just launch a company through what many see as kind of a secondary channel, organic social, not even paid social, organic social, and then follow it quickly with a healthy earned media program. But for very deliberate reasons, we want social as a reference point for that launch. And then all of a sudden we follow up with earned. We'll take an earned result there and then put some money behind it to boost it on social. It's all for the sake of creating a big funnel, which we can talk about. But really, the way that we stay focused on our clients' objectives is we keep the story at the center of our work.
Why might you start in sort of one area to pick up on that example? Why might you start in the social media area versus in earned or owned or someplace else?
Yeah, the agency that I started is true to who I am. It's B2B largely. We serve clients who sell technology to enterprises, often the Fortune 500, and it's very difficult they're very advanced, they're sophisticated technologies. They have sales cycles that last 9 months, 12 months, 18 months. The stories are involved, and often, especially given the point that media cycles are so compressed, and PR people like me outnumber journalists 6-1 these days. The journalists don't have time to keep up on all the stories and really dive in and understand what this new network analytics can do, not just for improving the performance of a network, but actually securing that same network. It's just very complex stuff, and we find if we want or need to tell a story like that, then all of a sudden we can find a way to tell it in a more controlled environment. And social gives us a lot more control over what that message is, how that story unfolds. The same is true in earned if we decide to not work with a journalist, but then produce our own op-eds and bylines. We might seek out control for that reason.
Where do you think communications is headed?
Decades ago, a lot of our work was predicated on relationships. That was again, that kind of central organizing function for media work. Who do you know? What do they know? Oh, yep, this story fits, and I'm going to see them next week. Let's go. And that was, I think, the sign of success. And as those newsrooms got whittled down, and the publishing industry went through what we know it went through, just the belt tightening, the work moved from relationships to more transactional. It was call them up, and they may not know you, but you're saying words that sound like the area that they cover, and you generally earn your way in there. What has happened since then is actually, I think it's less transactional these days. I actually picture it as our own little funnel in communications, not the marketing funnel in a company, but our communications funnel. I think that it's up to us to be kind of present with the journalists who we want to reach and influence through many, many steps in their journey along their beats.
I'm kind of curious about the role that values play in creating that cohesion among these, these disparate channels, whether it's that work or even in your storytelling, particularly when you consider, Gen Z and their stated preference for brands that align with their values. How are you beginning to think about that in some of the campaigns that you're doing for customers, for clients, especially in a B2B context, which is where you focus?
That's an interesting word, especially because I think that's a pivotal point, and I could see it going either way. And that's to say, I think when you're serving a consumer business, I do think values are at the forefront these days. Purpose is a very popular word in my line of work when you're serving Nike and when you're serving any consumer business. You think about, and we've talked about the role that not just the direct participants in retail who might be selling guns, the role that they might take on that issue, on a pivotal issue. That's a values-oriented issue. But then in the broader ecosystem of payments transacting around gun sales and all of that. I mean, those are, I think all of a sudden you capture just about every company out there has a reason to voice values and take a stance.
Jamey, what are some of the things that you see a lot of tech companies doing wrong from a Marcom perspective these days?
I think companies often kind of miss it on the high side and miss it on the low side. And what I mean by that is there's always been this popular idea in tech that is changing the world. And, Steve Jobs, recruited Scully over, instead of selling sugar water, why don't you come over and make a dent in the universe? Why don't you change the world? And there's clear value there. People want to sign on to that, whether you're an executive or an employee, or whether you're in the market, whether you're a customer. And yet, I think it's easy to propagate that. I think it's too easy to be too big. So I think that's where we see a lot of kind of companies, particularly big companies, just missing on the high side with grandiose messages.
One of the questions we love asking guests is a book or podcast that you'd like to recommend to our viewers.
My ritual is, I hate to say it, but the New York Times Daily every morning. I feel like I haven't started my day if I get to work and I had a call that I couldn't listen to the daily, so that's certainly my morning. I have Axios Pro Rata in the afternoon. I catch Recode and Pivot when I want longer form podcast. What book? The one that pops to mind is one you wouldn't expect, but Miles Davis's autobiography is a great one.
Cool, thanks Jamey.
Thank you.
That was Jamey Boike, the founder of Revere.